Today's webinar is about something that you probably don't expect a lot of recruiters to talk about, but in my opinion, this is one of the more important topics that you should be aware of, and something that relatively few attorneys do, and that's sorry about that. And that's staying employed with a single law firm for a long period of time. And just at the outset, one thing I want to say is this is that the idea of staying with a law firm is not in the psychology of most attorneys believe, and even law students, that they need to switch jobs and they need to, in order to get ahead and so forth. And I found that in many cases, that's actually not the truth, that the people that have the best careers and stay and have the most long-term success are often the people that are able to stick with and stay with employers the longest period of time. And in many cases, they actually are happier. They get ahead more. And they just have overall much better careers, even though people don't think that way. And there's a psychology of people that do think that way. And in my company, for example, and I'll talk about this in a little bit, the people that I've hired in the past that have been at the previous employers for the longest period of time typically always do the best. I mean, they find ways to make things work, and they're more likely to take criticism and things as a chance to improve and not necessarily to leave. If you go into any law firms that's been around, for 20 or 30 years, you're always going to find several attorneys, or at least a few, that have been there since the beginning of their careers. And these sorts of people are often the only people that have ever left after countless attorneys coming and going. I can't even begin to think of all the people that I've worked with in the past in different positions that have been attorneys that at our firm, or recruiters that are attorneys, and then there's a handful of people that have stuck around. The people that stuck around are always, most of the time, doing the best. And there's characteristics, I think, that characterize the types of attorneys that stick around, and it's something that I really do believe in. If you can make things work where you're at, it's always a smart thing to do. You're typically going to have a much better long-term career if you're able to stay the same place and do much better. And obviously, our people contact us and our company every day looking to switch positions. So I'm not saying that it's necessarily a bad thing to look for jobs. Of course it is. And there's many legal environments that are intolerable. There's many reasons to move firms and to switch firms. But the other thing to think about is a lot of times when people are looking at leaving different firms, they're talking about firms that have been around for 30 years or 50 years or 100 years. And they act as if there's just something so wrong with the firm that they need to leave. And obviously, if something's been around 100 plus years, there's reasons that there's things about that organization that are actually very good. And that if people are able to make things work, that organization is probably going to be around long after you are. So that's just something to think about. And when you are leaving a firm, you have to ask yourself if you're going to be able to if you're going to run into the same problems and the same reasons for leaving at your next firm as you do at the firm you're leaving. I know someone that's probably been at 20 firms, and his reasons for leaving are because he's got substance abuse problems. So it might make sense to think about why you're leaving your firms. Other people leave when they feel criticized, or other people leave when they feel like they can't be in control, or they're not going to be the number one attorney, or when they realize that that people think poorly of a certain type of work, or if they're challenged too much. So many times you have to ask yourself why you're leaving and the things that are really driving you to leave. So what I'm going to talk about today are the characteristics of people that stick with the same firm. And I actually believe that if you can make things work at your existing firm, then you really should stay there. And I never try to talk people into leaving a firm. I try to talk people, if it's in their best interest, to tell them the reasons that a certain job might be for them. But I certainly never try to talk people into leaving the firm. I'm not the kind of person that's calling people and giving them reasons and so forth. It's just not the way. I think if you think something doesn't work for you and you're 100% positive and those are good reasons, then it's good to look. But otherwise, it is also good to stay put. So these are the characteristics of people that stay at the same firm. So people that remain in the same firm typically are the sorts of people that are very committed to their jobs, and they're raised many times with the idea that you just have to be loyal to your employer, and and they fix things. And so the people that I've had that have worked the longest for me and that I've seen work the longest in all sorts of different firms are they tend to really, when they're criticized and when there's problems with their performance, they fix them. And that, which is really cool. Instead of like just saying I'm going to find some place that appreciates me or that sort of thing, they fix them. And they're very committed to their jobs. And they just want to, they believe that staying put with a single employer is just the right thing to do, and it's something that's expected. It's actually sad, but I see sometimes, and quite often actually, I see people that have been at the same employer for 20 plus years and may be forced to look for other opportunities. And I see that quite often. And when I say quite often, once every 3 or 4 weeks, maybe these days. But when these sorts of attorneys are looking for jobs, the ones that have been at their firms for a long time, they usually there's something profound has happened. It's something major. The firm may be going out of business, or something just huge has happened that's really beyond their control. And they almost act like they're going through a divorce, and there's like or someone close to them that they rely on has died. And for these types of attorneys, it's almost unthinkable it's to leave. It's very interesting when I meet attorneys like this, because they have so many good things to say and they go through problems and things at their firms, but overall they have a fidelity to their employer and they're loyal. And as a consequence, most of them have had very good careers, and they don't get pushed out when other people are getting pushed out, and they're doing things right, and it's just it's a very positive thing. When I see this kind of fidelity, it reminds me of the sorts of people that have been married for decades, and there tends to be a mutual respect, I think, that comes out of this way of thinking. The employer needs the person needs the employer, and they're not necessarily looking for other opportunities also all the time. One thing that's interesting to me is the job market has changed a lot. Now anytime you want a new job, you can pretty much go online. You can go on to a law firm website, or you can go on to Law Crossing or Indeed or different sites, and you can look for new jobs. It's not very hard to look for new jobs. And it's the same thing with people on dating sites. If someone's unhappy, they can get out of a relationship and suddenly start finding all sorts of people on dating sites. And so they're never really, it's very easy to separate from people, and and it's very easy not to commit. And it used to be in a law firm that it wasn't like that. It was very hard to find a new position, and very few people left. And it's the same thing with marriages. With marriage, divorce rates keep going up and that sort of thing. I saw something once in a social science class that showed that as rates of divorce go up in society, and I don't know which causes which, but as those go up, the rates of drug abuse, suicide, and other problems also increase. And so that's just something to think about. There's, that those two things are connected. And the bond between an employer and employee can be very powerful. It's much like the bond between a husband and wife with a very committed relationship. Both sides accept one another for the most part unconditionally, and they realize that there's problems with each other from time to time, but they get through them. And an attorney who is committed to their job is very similar to anybody who's committed to anything. There may be something else out there. There may be a better job that pays more. There may be something that's more fun, but they're loyal to that employer. And this is a healthy attitude. And I believe this can make the attorneys do well. I knew an attorney once, and I couldn't believe it, but he was, I don't know, he was a partner in a law firm and doing very well, maybe making $500,000 a year. And he was offered $1 million a year by a rival firm. He was making half of that, and he wasn't interested in the money. He was more concerned with staying where he was at and the bond he had with his current firm. And that's great. And this is how it works when two sides are committed to one another. When there's that commitment, people stay together, and that's a good thing. It's a very positive thing, and you don't see a lot of that anymore. And then he actually ended up staying at that firm for longer, and ended up making much more than that eventually. The other characteristic is attorneys that remain in the same firm typically are the type of people that aren't looking for interested in office gossip or finding reasons not to succeed in the firm. And there's always people in every firm that aren't doing well in their jobs. And in most cases, people that aren't doing well may be looking to cut corners. or they may just not be applying themselves. They may have other issues. But when that happens, these types of organizations will typically speak with the employee. And some people will correct the behavior and actually become much better. And others will get mad at the organization. And it's very common for people to go one way or another. When they realize they're not doing good work, they've done something wrong, very few people are able to overcome that. Some people do, but the very few people do what you would expect, which is step up, fix the problems, and actually get much better and make those things, make their weaknesses a strength. And so when that happens, a lot of attorneys may get mad at their organization. Some people just will not like their organization. They don't want to be part of a group. They don't feel the firm's good enough for them. They may be angry with the previous organization and transferring their anger at the previous organization to the new employer. And there's all sorts of issues there. I remember once a recruiter telling me, and I also read it somewhere else, that idea to hire someone who's been fired from the previous job, even if it wasn't that person's fault and they didn't do anything wrong. Because a lot of times, if someone's been fired from their previous job, they're going to be angry and they're going to take out their anger on the next organization. So if you have been fired from a job, you want to basically not be angry and take it as a learning opportunity. And everything is based on how you interpret things. You're much better off, instead of getting angry, realizing the mistake you may have made and fixing it and not letting that happen again, and then realizing that it's a chance to step up. And in every organization that you probably ever worked in, there's always going to be people that are angry at their employers, even if the employer hasn't done anything wrong. And they'll start rumors, they'll share their anger with others, and they'll forecast the fact that negative things are going to happen in the employer, and this happens in every employer. And there's people that will buy into that psychology and be part of those negative rumors, and there's ones that won't. And so it's just, you have to decide whether or not you want to be part of that. And I've noticed, for the most part, that attorneys who are able to remain in marriages, but also in with their employers, generally aren't interested in just participating in ongoing negativity and rumors. Sometimes they don't even pay attention to them. All times in an employer's history, every employer goes through problems and crises and different things. Even the best law firms have problems. And then when that happens, a lot of times people will just flood to the door. At other times, there's going to be other issues. And if an attorney remains at a law firm for a long period of time, they're generally the type of people that they may listen to the rumors and they may hear them, but they're not going to let them detract them from caring about their jobs or doing a good job. And where other people will suddenly leave a relationship when they hear some bad news or when something bad happens to their partner. And so these are just things to be concerned about and to pay attention to. Every firm you go to is going to have negative gossip. Every firm you go to is going to have a way of looking at it that's negative. Any firm you work at is going to have ways to look at it that are negative. And you need to decide whether or not you want to play that game. And if you're playing that game with a firm that's been around for 200 years or 100 years or 50 years, you should realize that it's bigger than you. There's always been people like you that have found fault with it. And really, that shouldn't be motivating things. You should be worrying about yourself and doing a good job and staying focused on that. I can tell you that I personally get sucked into law firm drama still. I'll represent a law firm and be told all this drama about them and then think I need to fix it and give them advice and stuff. And it's always, but every law firm's the same. They're dealing with this drama and these issues all the time. And they need to decide whether or not they're going to be mature and not deal with it and the people there, or whether they're going to fall into it. And it's a big challenge. And I think that honestly, the biggest characteristic of the people that are able to stay put in places just don't play those games. There's no reason to. You don't want to allow anything to color your outlook. I was talking to someone the other day, and it was interesting. And they were just someone that I knew socially. And the person said to me something about don't read this article about me because they're saying something negative about my husband and I or something. And I don't know, it was something to do with a house that I don't know that they were losing or they had been in financial trouble on or something. I don't even remember what it was, but and I didn't actually read the article, and I only learned about that later. But when the person told me about that, I said, I won't read it. I don't need to read whatever this is about. And the reason is why would I want to learn negative information about someone and color my view of them and their husband or whatever if I didn't have to? Why would I want to, participate in that? There's just no reason to. And so I didn't read the article. Later, the person explained to me what had happened and stuff, but I didn't read it. They just came out and volunteered this information, but I didn't read the article. And some people are doing whatever they can to look for negative news. And that's just not a psychology that I think is a good psychology to be part of, because you're going to always have the opportunity to learn about negative news at your firm. You're going to learn about attorneys doing things wrong. You're going to learn about attorneys having problems. You're going to learn and not participate in it. And one of the happiest people I know, one of the most successful people I know, is also, in my opinion, not very smart. I went to high school with him, and he was probably and I went to a good school, but he was, definitely one of the slower people in my class, with just not a quick study by any stretch of the imagination. But he had this habit every time someone would walk up to him and start sharing negative news, that he would just find a reason to excuse himself and walk away. He didn't want any part in it. And he would relate to everyone almost equally, even if there were people saying bad things about them. And he just wanted no part in it. And he's still like that to this day. And he's actually become a very successful person in his industry, which deals with entertainment and that sort of thing, where being good socially like that can benefit you. But at the same time, I always found that very interesting, because sometimes you look at people and you find out what is the reason for their happiness and success. And he's had the same business partner for 20 plus years. And then before that, he only had one or two jobs, and he just was the kind of person that never wanted to participate in negative news. And I always found that interesting, and I always remember that, because he's one of the only people I've ever met like that. And I think it helped him. And I think it's the same kind of characteristic that the most successful attorneys and the most successful people in a lot of firms have. I've known people that don't participate in gossip and other issues very well, and by doing that, it actually keeps them sane and happy. And then I've known people that then they go over to the other side and start doing that, and they end up becoming unhappy. And so I think there's something to this. And I think that for stability, happiness, and success, not participating in all this gossip and stuff can really help you. And then the other thing about attorneys that remain at the same firm for long periods of time is they're generally the sorts of people that aren't interested in being grandstanders. They're there to do their jobs and do them well, and that's important to them. And I once heard someone say, and I've actually observed it myself in a lot of people, but a lot of times the most successful people are the most screwed up. And they're playing games, they're undermining, they're weird with information, there's maybe some truth to that to some extent. I don't know that it's completely true, but I think there's some truth to it. And the attorneys that stay in the same firms aren't generally as concerned with getting ahead or getting ahead quickly as a lot of other attorneys are. They're just not like that. And a lot of times attorneys that are very concerned with getting ahead are going to leave because they want better opportunities, or they want someone that's going to immediately advance them, which is insane. I've seen attorneys leave at year 2 or 3 of a law firm because they were worried they weren't going to make partner immediately. And then they start their own law firms and get in over their head. And then other attorneys have seen that grandstand will act like they're smarter than partners, and they are sometimes. There's nothing to stop an associate from being much smarter than a partner. Of course they can be smarter. The people are gifted with different levels of intelligence, or they may see things and stuff that the partners don't in their firms if they're an associate, even a young associate. I've seen young associates fired for being much smarter than partners and grandstand and stuff. So if you're really good at your job, you don't need to show other people that you're better than them. And the best attorneys and the ones that stay in their jobs the longest period are generally most interested in just doing their jobs. They have faith in their organizations. They believe that things are going to work out for them. They're not trying to attract attention and get a lot of definitely don't try to get rewards and stuff for everything. Their biggest concern is doing the best possible job that they can. And the thing that happens if an attorney remains focused on their work and not grandstand is they typically end up getting ahead. And then other attorneys around them end up putting their feet in their mouth. When I remember when I first started practicing, I met an attorney that had been first in his class from not, I mean, maybe a top 10 law school or 15 law school. He was editor in chief of the school's law review. He was a good looking, motivated guy, like 6'2", just someone that you really thought was going places. And he, even on his spare time, he wrote articles about different practice areas and stuff. And he would argue with partners about different points in law. And the thing was, when he did argue with people, he would actually beat these partners in these arguments. And the firm I was at the time was Quinn Emanuel, and so these were pretty smart guys and gone to Harvard and practiced at Cravath, and I can remember. And so they were guys. But the thing is, he was so smart that and thought he knew things so well that he ended up sabotaging his career. And he called a newspaper to discuss a case he was working on. And then he ended up being quoted on the front page of the Los Angeles Daily Journal, which is the legal newspaper, for his opinions with a picture of him, like one of these pictures, like leaning back in a conference room desk and this is a first year associate, mind you, that's been out of law school for 6 months. But it's very funny when you think about it. And the problem was it was a large client, but the client was very upset. And he ended up leaving the firm and actually never worked for a large law firm again. I think he worked for his uncle or something for a few years before getting a job in the government, which is just, he sabotaged his career. And this was a very smart guy that by all stretch of the imagination could have been very successful. I'll never forget that picture of them on the front page of the paper, because it was like one of these, I don't even know how to explain it. And it's important that you do keep a low profile, and you never want to be in the limelight if you can avoid it. And because if anybody that's in the limelight will be pushed down. I have competitors that are very eager to take things that I write out of context and give them to people that they advertise with and stuff to try to have articles. And people, anytime you're in the limelight, you become a target. And you're better off really being, at least in a law firm, to the extent you can, to keep a low profile, because you're definitely going to lose. And when you lose, people will crush you, especially if you're a threat to them. Now, that's not to say you won't lose. Some people don't win a lot. But when you're young and when you're in a law firm with a group of people, you're going to often get crushed. And you just need to be very careful, like the attorney I'm telling you about. And then the other thing is attorneys that are able to remain in law firms for a long period of time typically do very good, but not necessarily brilliant work, meaning, they're not the smartest people. They're very good at pacing themselves, and they manage to do work that is good, but not necessarily extraordinary. I know of a few partners who are very good at their jobs and became partners in very big firms, and they were able to become very successful by really pacing themselves. So they were still working lots of hours, but they would take off work early, like on 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon to go spend 2 or 3 hours at the gym. And then they would work on the weekends, but they would definitely take Friday night and Saturday night off. And then they would leave at normal hours and just not allow the stress to get to them too much. And then while other people were blowing themselves up, they managed to not go crazy with the hours and stuff. So I think, and then not be like the most brilliant attorney. So I think a lot of being very good at what you do is just about showing up. And there's a lot of very smart attorneys inside of law firms, no doubt about it. But many times the most extraordinary people in terms of the smartest aren't the ones that get ahead. The ones that get ahead are the ones that are able to consistently show up, and they don't have to be the brightest flame. They need to get the work done, but they need to show up and do good work, but not necessarily the best work. Now, I'm not saying that by any stretch of the imagination that you should not try to do good work. But what I am saying is that this idea that you need to work super hard and just put in these superhuman hours and then later on look like you're not the best person is not the smartest thing to do many times. Okay, so I'm going to go on here. And then the next thing is that oftentimes the smartest attorneys out there are often the ones that, in my opinion, that have the most problems. And if you can consistently show up for work, do an excellent job, and clients, colleagues, and other people understand that, then you're going to be much better off. And in the end, it's really about your ability to get the work done. And that's the most important thing, not necessarily to do the absolute best or look like you're the absolute best out there. It's just not necessary. Okay. And then one of the things that's very interesting that I've noticed also is that if an attorney's been at the same firm for a long period of time, there's an understanding that develops between attorneys that are insiders and outsiders. And what happens is that there's an institutional understanding, and there's people there that are there for a long period of time that people know will never leave. And there's an institutional understanding is what I'd like to call it. And what that means is there's this idea that people are going to come and go, but we're the ones that are committed to the organization. We're the kind of heart and soul of this firm, and so forth. And then the people that are there are much more committed to each other because they know they've seen oodles of people coming and going through the firm over the years, and then they know that they're the ones that are likely to stick around, and they're the ones that have the commitment and so forth. And so they protect one another. They make sure that they get work. They make sure that they're not part of negative things happening at the firm, and they do their absolute best to protect each other, and that's very helpful. Another thing that happens that there's just bonds, and the bonds are often invisible, but they're very real bonds, and they're powerful. I know I'd lateraled into a firm where all the other people in my class and for the next 2 or 3 years up and down had all been summer associates in that office. And I always felt like an outsider. They didn't want to integrate people from the outside because they had all these shared experiences and stuff. And it was very interesting. And those people would protect each other. And they believed that people that were coming and going through were not likely to stick around, and they made it difficult for them to stick around. So if you're part of that group, that's a good thing. And so if you've been with the same firm for decades, you're going to be part of the fabric of the firm, and really, for the most part, unquestioned. And so that's actually when a major benefit too, is that the longer you are with a place, the less likely you often are to be let go, the more likely they are to overlook problems, the more access to information about how to get work you'll have, the more things that'll be positive. And if you keep your head down and you don't get involved in drama and you're not trying to grandstand and things, then you're likely to stick around and be there for a long period of time. I'm a recruiter, and I certainly probably a little odd that I'm coming to defense of an attorney remaining in the same firms for a long period of time, but it's a very important thing, I think. And I think that if you're able to do that, you're going to be much better off many times than not. Now, there's very good reasons to move. If you're capable of working at a better firm, getting more access to more work, and taking your career much farther, then that's a good reason to move. And there's all sorts of reasons that I would recommend an attorney move firms. I'm not saying not to move, but I am saying that if you're at a decent place and you can make it work, you may often be a champion in the long run. Almost every week I tell someone the story that when I graduated from law school, I clerked for a judge, and it was in Michigan, but it wasn't in Detroit. It was a city outside Detroit. And all of these attorneys would come into to argue motions from all these kind of smaller markets around the area that I was in. So they would come from like Flint, they would come from Bay City and Midland, and all these small firms. And a lot of those people I met people that were young associates at a lot of those firms that had gone to, I don't know, local law schools, whether it was Michigan or other schools in Detroit and stuff. And then I looked them up like 20 years later, and several people that I met were all still at the same firms. None of them had left. They were all working at these same firms in these cities, and these are not big cities. And so to me, that really said something. It said that in certain markets we go to, there's not a lot of opportunities if you're working in Midland, Michigan, to go to work at other firms. So you make it work. But they were all practicing law, and they were all still employed, and now they're, of course, heads of the law firms and all that sort of things, and probably have had very good careers. But if those attorneys had gone to work in larger cities and larger markets where they had all these other opportunities and reasons to find fault with their firms and so forth, none of them would be at those firms. They would have been at several firms. They would have gone in-house. They would have dropped out of the practice of law. Maybe they would have done things to sabotage themselves, but they had to make it work. And so that psychology of making things work, I think, has made them probably, and I'm sure they all haven't had the happiest lives and careers. I'm not by any stretch of the imagination saying that. But what I am saying is that when you make things work with an employer, you're typically much better off in the long run, and you're going to have a much better career than people that do the opposite, which is not make things work. And I've seen that just time and time again. And the attorneys that do that and people that do that in every profession tend to do much better. And I think that, in my opinion, that the people that are able to remain in longer period, best firms, longer periods of times, are just less tormented. They're socially and psychologically happier than people that are leaving all the time. They're just, I don't know, they're just something about them. They're better people in many respects. They have a home, they have people that protect them, and they have a group. And it used to be too, and one of the worst things for people when humans were smaller groups was shunning. So shunning means when someone is not respected in a group, and then they're kicked out of the group, and then they don't have the group to be with. And so when people ignore us, that's shunning. When people don't talk to us, that's shunning. And when groups get rid of us and we don't have a group, that's shunning. And people that are unemployed, it's a horrible feeling. And when you don't have tight connections with a group, it's a horrible feeling. For some people, being single or not desirable or not liked by their mate is a form of shunning and unhappy. So if you can make things work, many times you're going to be much happier in your life and your career. And organizations that have been around for a long period of time are typically very strong organizations, and there's something about them that's very good. And you should try to make things work if you can. And if you're not, then you should look at what you can do differently to make things work. People respect it when people come back from mistakes and errors and things and are able to do much better in an organization. And they like that. Okay, I'm going to take a quick break for 1 or 2 minutes and just to grab some more coffee, and then I'll take as many questions as people have. I typically on these calls, people have a lot of questions, and we'll just answer questions about. Most of the questions tend to be about things not having to do with the webinar, but if you'd like to ask questions about the webinar, I'd love to answer them as well. Okay, so let's get started. Let me just, before I take questions, I'm going to do one thing here and just open up a screen, a Word screen, so I can show the questions on the screen. Just give me one. Okay, so let's go to the first question here. Let me just see here. Okay, the first question is, I joined a big law firm as an attorney in January after spending months watching your presentations. Good. I have been experiencing many of the negative aspects you're talking about, such as other staff and attorneys talking shit about me and my work product. My attorney friend told me that I need to keep my head down, shut up, and do the work. And once I do good work, people will start liking me. I didn't realize how law firms operate. I'm planning on staying at the firm and fixing my work product and making friends of the firm. I just wanted to get your input on this as well. Okay, well, that's a good question. Staff attorneys and others will talk shit about you and your work product if they don't like it, or if you're making mistakes. And so one of the problems is with new attorneys especially is that no new attorney knows what they're doing. So you shouldn't take any of this stuff personally, and it's not something to worry about that much at this point, other than making sure you fix it. So what I recommend attorneys do when they're new is you try to be as careful as you possibly can with the work that you're doing. You try to research things and make sure you're coming up with the right answers. You make sure you turn in a work product with as few errors as possible, so you proofread everything very closely, and just be very thorough. This is what attorneys are paid to do. I think that the problem with a lot of new attorneys is that they rush through things, and they're in the habit of rushing, and the rushing is what gets you into trouble. You believe that you're excited to show an answer to the client or to the person you're doing the work for, and then you rush through the work and you make mistakes. You're excited to do something correctly, and because of that you make mistakes. And so that's one of the big issues I think that people have, is the rushing. So you need to slow down. You need to double check your work, and you need to look at it from a very critical eye. And And if you don't do that, then other people that are experienced doing the work are going to find fault with you. There's nothing wrong with making friends of the firm. If you make friends of the firm and don't share with them too much personal information about yourself, then those friends can actually help you. If you tell them negative information about yourself or they see a bad side of you, and that could be things like things personal in your life and so forth, then it could turn out very poorly. So I would recommend just keeping your too many details of your personal life to yourself. And by that, if you're doing things in your personal life that people in the firm would not approve of, if you're just having issues, then in your personal life, that could be a problem. So I knew of an associate once that, and this is a funny story, but it's a true story. So there was a woman that I knew that made friends with a partner in her firm that she was doing all of her work for. And that partner would talk to her about her personal life all the time, meaning helping her with dating profiles and all sorts of things. And then one week, that woman that was working for this partner went and had met somebody briefly at, I don't know, some Club Med or something. It was just they had met someone and talked to them, and then that person came out and visited her, and they had a raucous affair one weekend. And so she told the partner about this, and the partner, for whatever reason, didn't like hearing about her personal life. And when she told her about it, suddenly didn't approve of this woman anymore and stopped giving her work. And because she was in a very small department, that meant she no longer was able to get work. And so that's a real problem when you share your personal life. Sometimes that can really get in your way of you getting work. You do have to fix your work product. You should be, especially as a young attorney, you need to be all over it. Your work product needs to be tight, and by tight, you need to eliminate errors, and you need to turn in good stuff, and then you need to see everything going on around you, because if you're not, you're going to get pushed out, and it happens to a ton of people. Okay, let me see here. This next question says, I am a first year who started in deeply personal, who started in the fall in Big Law. Recently I've been working so much I barely sleep, if at all. And sometimes I don't even have time to get a proper meal since I won't have time to prep food, etc. Wonder if there's some way I can completely tone down work. I've tried I can't get this now, but I can get to in 6 hours or so. But then seniors will call other seniors and say that I have to do their work. Okay, so yeah, so you need to, you can't, as a first year, you're expected to work very hard. In the medical profession, there's residents, and the residents will work 48 hours straight and so forth. So it's really, the law is a similar type of profession, and the hazing and the need to make money from people that are very junior and hungry is there. You also, if you work very long hours, you will certainly improve and learn, and a lot of this stuff will become instinctual to you, and you'll become a better attorney. But I agree that sleeping is important, and I agree that eating is important, and if you need to be, if turning down work is going to make you more effective, then I would recommend doing it. So a senior associate is typically not reviewing how many hours you work. Now, I'm not saying you to quote me on that and take my advice, but you can tell them whether or not you have time to do the work. And if you don't, and you need to take care of yourself, then I really would recommend trying to turn down the work. And I don't even know about saying in 6 hours or so. You need to have time to do the work. But the biggest problem with this is if you do their work and you don't do a good job, then you'll get a bad review. So that's that, and then people. So this first attorney up here was doing too much work, or was doing work and not doing good work, and then this next attorney is doing too much work. So if you don't turn down work and you're unable to do a good job with your work, then you're going to get in trouble. And so if it was me, I would recommend doing what you can to moderate your work so you can do as good of a job with the work you have. Because if you turn in work with problems, that's probably more of a problem than turning down work. I knew, and I understand what you're saying. When I was in a law firm, actually the first firm I was at, I couldn't believe it. I was doing a filing almost every day. I had something due, whether it was like a summary judgment motion or just all sorts of things. And so I called up a senior partner that was the guy that handed out work. And I was like, I'm just doing all this work. This is insane. I have filings every day. And he said, well, if you have more than one summary judgment motion due in a day, we'll get you some help. And it was at that point where summary judgment motion is like a big deal. It's a lot of work. So it was at that point that I realized that I definitely had too much work and it was too much. But leaving because there's too much work, you need to learn how to moderate it. And the best way to do that is to turn down work if you possibly can, so you can concentrate on the stuff that's in front of you. And the same thing, one final point I do want to add though is that if you sometimes you turning down work can get you in trouble, and it depends on the firm. I've seen people turn down work and have problems because of that. And I'm not going to tell you there's a solution to it, but at the same time, I would be careful. Okay. I hope that answer helps. I know it's a lot of information. I would say that your best option though really is to be able to do the best quality work and bill as many hours as you possibly can doing that, and then get a reputation for doing good work and getting work done. Okay, my goal is to work in a Vault 10 firm in New York, but I might also want to transfer to California. I've been offered a chance to attend Duke for half price, or I can attend Columbia at full price. Which law school is a better choice considering my goals? Those are both great law schools. I don't know if your goal is to work at a Vault 10 firm in New York, then there's a couple different things for each firm. So the problem with Columbia is the firms in New York get a lot of Columbia applicants. And so it sometimes, and they know what the grading system is at Columbia and they're very familiar with it. And Columbia is a bigger law school than Duke, but I don't know. I think both law schools could potentially be good for you in order to get the best position in New York. Columbia does have a lot more firms from New York interviewing at Duke, but Duke is an exotic school for New York. One thing I've noticed about Duke is that sometimes people come out of there and there's just something a little strange socially going on there. I don't know what it is, but many times, and not many times, but there every year there's kind of people that really have a lot of issues going to different law schools and drop out of big law firms very quickly. And Duke seems to have a very high proportion of that. I don't know why. And Columbia is also a good law school. Columbia is I think it's a little bit more about working in law firms, and especially in New York. But the people tend to be it's a little bit more brainier, academic, and that sort of thing than Duke. But Duke, I don't know, Duke might even be harder to get into than Columbia. I have no idea what it is these days. So both of them offer you something in terms of getting into the best firm. Typically, most people that attend law schools, the smartest thing you can do is to go to the best law school you get into and not think about it regardless of price. I don't know what Duke is ranked these days, and I don't know what Columbia is. They're all in the same league. I think Columbia is probably ranked a little bit higher, but I could be wrong. I think Columbia, if you want to work in New York, both of those are great schools. The only thing I like about Duke is that there's a little bit of scarcity there, so there's not as many people coming out of Duke, and so in some respects it's better. But there is something a little off about the social. I don't know what it is, but there's just a lot of weird people that have problems that come out of Duke. You may have read the book, I Hope They Serve Beer in Hell or whatever, which is a book by a guy, I think his name's Max something, where he talks about drugs and sex and all this stuff. And while he was at Duke, I think. So there's just a lot of weird things that come out of that school for some reason. I don't know why it is. But I've seen it for decades now. And I think it looks like a beautiful campus, and it's a very, nice school. And I've never been there, but I think there's a lot of good things about it. So, but typically you want to go to the best law school you can possibly get into. Okay, so I would recommend, even if Columbia is more expensive, the money that the school costs in the long run is not going to really be that big of a deal to you, and the law over time. Okay, let's see, sorry. Okay, hi, I'm a former judicial clerk who recently started at a big law firm and the litigation group. I really enjoy clerking. I honestly never should have left there. I fucked up so bad. I don't know if this place is actually that dysfunctional or I just hate it, but it's only been a few months and I'm on 2 separate psych medications and crying daily and dry heaving all the time because it's so miserable. It's been weeks since I've had a day where I didn't work. I'm drowning in assignments and I can't sleep because I'm so anxious about getting that next email. I can't eat because I constantly feel sick. Every time I put out one fire, another pops up within minutes. I don't care in the money. I would gladly take a huge pay cut for reasonable hours and lower expectations, but I signed a lease in an apartment. And I really can't afford on much less this, so I'm stuck until my lease ends in November. How do I make it for the next 8 months and get out of life? Okay, so the worst thing so let's talk about a couple different things. If you really like clerking, then that is just a better place for you. I don't know where you are, if you're in New York or what area of the country you're in, but I think that it sounds like you're just in a bad place. So and that's perfectly understandable based on what is going on with you. So let's just talk about a couple different things in terms of what's going on. So if you enjoy clerking, that means you like to write, you like a small environment, and these are great questions. This is going to help everyone on this call and other people too that come later. You like a small environment, you enjoy, wow. Okay, you're at a big and then you enjoy research. The thing about working inside of a lot, and then you were able to understand the rules and judge during clerking, and the hours were okay, and the pay was fine because you're not complaining about the pay. So let's just get a couple things. So this is what you like, and it sounds like you liked it a lot. So there's nothing wrong with actually, you can be a career. So you have a lot of options, by the way. Your options right now for your future after November, we don't even have to talk about November, but your options are the following. You can clerk, you can work in a smaller firm without so many demands. You might like doing appellate work. You could work in a smaller market. And what else here? You can work in a smaller market. You can work in what else can you do? Work in academia. You can work for the government doing. So one of the things that I like to do is, and then this is what you like. These are some options. Let's talk about a couple things first. Let's talk about your lease. So your lease, you can look this up, but if you leave, the only thing that can happen is they can sue you for your lease and get a default judgment if you don't fight it, or get a judgment. So you can get a judgment, and then when they get a judgment, they can try to collect on it, which they probably won't. I don't think judgments go on your credit report anymore. They used to, but they don't go on your credit report. So if you're completely losing your mind, then maybe I don't know, but you would have to research this. But if you are just completely losing your mind, then you might be much better off just potentially leaving and not paying for your apartment, because you need to save yourself. That's the first thing. So you need to save yourself. The problem with the drugs and stuff, with the prescription drugs, I'm just trying to cover all these things for you real briefly. But you can definitely leave your lease. I talk to people all the time that are having issues with paying different expenses. I was talking to an attorney yesterday who's a solo practitioner that has a lease or not a lease, but a loan that she's thinking about not paying because she doesn't have the money. And I told her basically not to pay it, because why would you pay it if you can't afford to pay other things, including your mortgage? But that's up to you. The prescription drugs. So lots of people are on prescription drugs. And so let's talk about that real briefly. So the problem with prescription drugs is that you'll become dependent on them. And at some point you'll want to get off them. And prescription drugs. So you'll become dependent. And at some point you'll probably want to get off them. Get off them. And so when you try to get off them, then you have to deal with that. And that's the other. And then the other thing is they're going to dull you and make you not as effective as you could be. And you're taking them because you're covering up some other issue, because covering up another issue, and that's fine. If they're helping you, that's great. But the real issue is something else. That if you fix them, because it sounds to me like when you were clerking, you were not on drugs, so everything was good. So it's the firm that's on drugs. So it's the firm that's causing the issues. So that's what to remember. So the firm is causing issues. So the thing about when you're a new attorney is, it sounds to me like, I don't think it's just why people experience let me see, sick, heaving, miserable. Okay, so everything that you're experiencing in terms of not liking your job is something that everybody goes through depending on the person. So new attorneys, one of the things that happens with new attorneys is you don't know what you are doing, do not know what you are doing because you're learning for the first time. You also feel powerless because you can't control hours. The feedback you're getting is probably not positive, not all positive. And then the hours are difficult. And the thing I meet all the time, I meet partners that are coming out of different law firms and so forth that are unhappy. And a lot of times partners leave their firms because they feel like they're under attack from attorneys in their own firm all the time, under attack from attorneys in their own firm. And that's part of practicing law. When an example is a litigator, and this is what you are, a litigator's boss is senior associates, it's partners, court, it's their peers looking for them to do stuff wrong. And then you have a significant other or someone dependent on you, and so forth. So you have all these people that are creating pressure, and it's very difficult to manage it all. So then you get people in your situation trying to take pills and so forth, and that's fine. So part of what you're dealing with is a challenge, and I've been there because I clerked and then went into extremely demanding firms. So I understand exactly what you're dealing with. My breaking point personally was I went into work one day on a Wednesday and didn't get home until a Sunday. And then when I got home, just a complete mess. It took me hours to fall asleep. And by the time I finally fell asleep, I got a call from a partner that I had to come back into work because they hadn't gotten the research that I'd sent because the firm had rebooted their servers overnight. So all these emails were stuck. Well, anyway, it's just horrible. So these are your options, and your other option is to stay where you are. Your other option is to take time off, medical leave or something. And these are all the options. Now, if you're going to leave anyway, you could also take a vacation and just say, or need to visit family or something. But your option is to be self-preservation. Your other option is to turn down work, or go part-time, and all these other things. These are all work, or to stay where you're at. So those are one of the things. But it sounds like that you're not after money. You're not after prestige. You like clerking. You liked what you were doing there. And this is just for whatever reason, you've hit your boiling point and a point where you can't necessarily cope anymore. And that's perfectly fine. Everybody hits their boiling point at different points in time, and I even have hit my boiling point. I even hit my boiling point till this day in time. This day, if I have so many things that are pressuring me in one way or another, in directions, then it becomes. Then sometimes I can't deal. I don't want to talk to people. I don't want to. I need a timeout. And then the other thing that I would recommend is this is actually for every attorney out there, and I think we've covered this several times, but it's just self-care. So one of the things that a partner told me when I was very young, and he became a friend of mine, he told me that no one is ever going to tell you to slow down, tell you to slow down. And the reason no one's ever going to tell you to slow down is because they feel that if they tell you to slow down, then they're going to lose money. So law firm loses money. Stop if you don't work as hard. Senior associates lose money or don't get work done. So most very successful partners, the name of the game is keeping your head together. So keeping your head on straight. And so that's just something that very few people are able to do, and something that you need to really think about. I took a class once at the Disney Leadership or Disney Institute class, and it was an expensive class. It was like maybe, I don't know, $5,000 for 3 days or $5,000 for 4 days. And the only thing I got out of it is, and the only thing I remembered one thing, and it was just leadership is about keeping calm. So that means you need to keep calm. So I took that to heart, and what I do for self-care is just, and this is something that everyone I think should bake into their is exercise, meditation, and those sorts of things. So I block out time for both each day, and then I also block out time for journaling. And my journaling is just, it's pretty simple. I have questions I ask myself that are pretty straightforward. They're what are you unhappy? What are you angry about? I think. What you write down what you're angry about, then you write down what you're grateful for, or what are you excited about. On that, you just, and I don't have the questions in front of me. There's several of them, but just writing these out each day, and exercise and meditation. So building those things into yourself each day will all take you out of your mind. The exercise takes you out of your mind. The meditation takes you out of your mind, and the journaling will give you some some perspective, what the things that are bothering you. So all that is very helpful from a self-care standpoint. And I think that very few people do that. And because they don't do that, it ends up hurting them. Even the most successful attorneys I know of are out there exercising. They're running every day. They're building that time to do their stuff. And what many people do is they take the easy way out, and I'm bad self-care. So bad self-care is what most people do. And what most people do, attorneys do, is they take the easy way out, and what they do is they use pot, or they use alcohol, or sometimes prescription drugs. And this is just, I'm bringing all this up because, and prescription drugs. And I would say you're talking about probably 75% of all attorneys are doing something along these lines. So these are really high things, but this is almost the majority of the people that I know did all these. So let me tell you the problems with each of these just real quickly, because I'm probably talking to several people here that are doing these things. Other self-care is also religion, which can be very good. I know very few people that are active in religion that just can't. That it does help with stress. Whatever your religion is, it gives you an outlet with something outside yourself, with others, plus something outside yourself. Your question, by the way, is helping a lot of people. That's why I'm spending so much time on it. So the problem with pot is it makes you dumb, or makes you slow. You're slow, and it stays in your system. It makes you slow for a while. Different people are affected by drugs different ways, but a lot of times you'll hear people say dude, or like a lot of, or that sort of thing, because their mind is just taking them a while to process stuff. And the other big problem is that when you're not using it, you can experience a lot of anxiety. So that's one issue. The other issue with drinking is it will slow you down the next day, physically and mentally, and then will also cause anxiety, and eventually, with almost everyone, which is alcoholism. And then all these things people are using to cover up issues. You're generally better off. I don't drink or smoke pot or anything but I certainly have in the past. I'm not going to lie about any of this. Your issues that here are that you're doing everything that that everybody else that's come before you has done. And I think that you need to understand like how you're processing everything and what you're doing. My first option, there's a saying in business, which is pay yourself first, meaning a lot of times attorneys are in business, like businesses will go bankrupt, or people will have all sorts of problems because they're not paying themselves. They're paying all their employees, but they never pay themselves first. And so, the self-care means taking care of yourself first, meaning whatever the stuff is that keeps you sane, you need to do. And this will give you something to look forward to. And then all this other stuff you can do later on. It sounds you want 1 year in a law firm or whatever, 8 months, and that's it. And that may be it. But the other thing is that the thing that, that's hard is when you're new, you're learning. So you're learning, and it may be your first real job. And so you have to go through this whole process of learning how to become a good associate and to become something, and which is an attorney, and that can take a few years. And the only other final thing I would do for self-care is you need someone to talk to. So I would talk to a therapist a few times a week for a while, and bounce ideas off them. So you have something to look forward to. Just for 1 hour or whatever, or 50 minutes, you can talk to them on the phone and go from there. And just to work through all this. This will give you perspective, and you need to get outside of yourself. And that's what I would recommend. I hope everyone appreciated all that time on that. But that's, if you want to if anyone else has follow-up questions or suggestions of what you've done that could help the person that just asked that question, that would be great, because I know I certainly don't have all the answers, but all this stuff I've thought about a lot, and I hope it does help you. Ultimately, my advice to you is to pay yourself first, meaning you want to make sure that you go to things that are supporting you, which is religion, journaling, exercise, and meditation every day, and give yourself stuff to look forward to that keeps you sane. And then just keep doing the work. But the firm's not going to fire someone that was a clerk and is working at a big firm, most likely because you're just not doing all this work all of a sudden. They're not going to do it because it sounds in many cases the problem is you. So you not you, but you're expecting too much of yourself. And you can't expect everything. I think what we talked about today is that you don't necessarily need to expect so much of yourself. You need to calm down and not maybe work as hard and take as many assignments as you can. Okay, I'm a fourth year associate. This next question is, I'm a fourth year associate in corporate. I admit I'm not the most experienced deal attorney out there, and mostly I'm on my own business trying to do a good job and basically be a good person to work with. The last 18 months or so made me suspect I've been a fool all this time regarding my hours. I tried pretty hard to be accurate with my billing, but the last few deals I've been reviewing timesheets. I can see that people are inflating their hours. At first, I thought that there must be work I'm not seeing, so it all makes sense. I just don't get the whole picture. But I've been seeing entries for a while for work streams I know very well, and it's obvious some people are inflating their hours. I'm set at the moment because I'll work for hours on a markup, send it to the senior to review, and the senior send it 15 minutes later, unedited to the partner, and now I see the seniors billing hours on that markup too. They didn't do almost anything at all. Is this how the game is played? Unfortunately, I hate to be the one to break this to you, and I hate to say this to all the other people on this call, but yes, I think it is. And I never did that, and I never did that because I think it's dishonest, and I have a conscience, and I feel that if you do something that's bad, then it ends up coming back to you in negative ways. I think that when you do people that do bad things, they're tormented by guilt and they're tormented by issues, even if they're a little bit sociopathic. I would maybe not sociopaths, but yes, I think that's correct. So I learned about this happening when I was at a firm, and I saw something very similar to that. There was an associate that was in an office next to me, and he had worked all weekend, and he lived in Orange County, which is about an hour from, or maybe a little, from downtown Los Angeles. So he'd actually slept in his car for a few hours each night and worked all weekend. So he worked, I don't know, 30 hours or something, or more, a little more than that, like 50 hours getting something done. And he came in on Monday and turned in his timesheet. And then he shared a secretary with a partner that he turned the work into, and the partner had written down like 20 or 30 hours for reviewing and revising this attorney's work, and he hadn't seen it because the attorney had just turned it in that morning. That kind of stuff does happen a lot. I know of, I was at another firm and there was a partner there that was very social and going out all the time and clearly didn't work that hard and was very healthy, and he allegedly billed over 3,000 hours a year. I don't like it. I think that, and I don't. I was, when the whole time I was practicing law, no one ever questioned me on my hours and said they were too long. No one ever said they were too short. So no law firm, I think, is ever going to tell you that you're billing too much or too. They will tell you if you're billing too little or not working hard enough. But yeah, I think that's how the game is played. I think if you write down I think that in some places, I don't think in other places, everything's business. So if your law firm is charging too much money for too many hours, then I think that it's going to come back and the clients aren't going to like it or pay for the work. Many clients don't know. And so I do think that's how the game is played a lot of places. And it's unfortunate that it happens like that. I know that I've been ripped off many times by attorneys that I've hired that have overbilled me for work. And so it's not cool. And do people get ahead by writing down false hours? Probably. I had an instance where I was working with a very smart attorney. I had gone to the University of Chicago Law School and finished at the very top of his class a few years ago. And he had very good attorney, and he had been let go from his firm because he was given a junior partner had brought in a certain type of assignment, and he was told to start writing memos and do all this stuff. And he figured out he was so smart. He figured out within 45 minutes that there was a solution to the problem that would make a lawsuit unnecessary, that would make all this research unnecessary, and would save the client potentially hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars in litigation. And he brought that to the partner and said, none of this is necessary because you can do this. And instead of being happy, the partner actually ended up getting fired. Yeah, so I don't know what to tell you. I'm not saying all law firms are bad, because I think most of them are good, but law firms are made up of humans, and humans, some of them are honest, some of them aren't. And that's just something for you to be aware of. I think the majority of attorneys in large law firms are honest. I think the majority of attorneys in most law firms are honest, but I do think that a lot of them aren't, and that's unfortunate. Wow, that's a great question. Let's see here. And if anybody else has more questions too, I'm happy to answer any that you guys have. Let me just see here. These are great questions today. Some of them are very deep, so I like that. Actually, most of them are fairly deep questions. Okay, so when you're working in a gossipy environment, what's the best way to address gossipy bad apples when they come into you and suck you into law firm drama? I know you shared excusing yourself, but it may not be an option. Are there any suggestions you have at this point? The biggest thing I would say is that there's always a way to look at things in a negative way, and there's always a way to look at things in a positive way. And anybody you talk to can certainly can talk either negatively or positively about something. The problem with negative gossip is it changes how you think about things. And I used to get mad. I had a good friend at a law firm, and when the second law firm I was in, she used to come in and just talk to me about negative stuff every day, and then would pull me into conversations about negative people. And eventually I got mad. I was like, this is my job, and I'm trying to make things work here, and I want to be happy and enjoy it. I prefer to see the good side of things. And that's how certain people are. Certain people are just want to see the negative side of stuff. And if you're around people that are doing that all the time, it's going to affect you, and you're going to probably become negative too. So you don't necessarily, you don't need to, if you want to be part of that, it's not going to help you. And you need to concentrate on negative stuff, and just remember on positive stuff. And just remember that your law firm may have been around 50 years, may have been around 100 years. There's always going to be negative stuff to say about a law firm. And the people that do the best in the long run are going to be the best. And people, a lot of times when people try to suck you, the smartest people, many times I've noticed, when someone's talking to them about drama, and I'm not saying that I'm not guilty about talking about drama either, because I've definitely been the drama maker. But when the smartest people, when I've noticed, when I'm trying to talk about drama, the ones that are the best, they'll just smile, and then they won't say anything, and they won't comment one way or another, and they'll walk away, or they'll talk about something else, or they'll change the topic and just won't engage with it, because they want you to take sides. And a lot of times, if somebody, like a lot of times the people that they're getting into drama. So an example would be like, say some partner doesn't like their work. So then they find out a piece of drama about that partner. And so they go and they talk about that drama with other people, and then they want other people to agree with them. Then the person that started the drama will say something like, everyone is talking about this person or whatever, or about this person, or everyone agrees that this person is this. Everyone agrees. And they'll just, a lot of times the people that are the biggest drama will use everyone thinks, because they're trying to get other people on their side to make themselves right and to take care of their self-esteem. And so that's not something that you need to participate in. If you hear about this stuff over the long run, you're participating in these negative things a lot, then it can really do you harm, because it changes how you think about things too. If you're very happy with a friend, and all of a sudden people come and start telling you all this negative stuff about a friend, then that relationship could be blown, and that's not cool. You'll feel negatively about the person. I've certainly been around people when suddenly you can tell that there's some piece of bad news that they've learned about someone, or that they don't like them anymore. And so if you allow other people to influence your life, it's not good. You just need to be careful. And great question today, everyone. Thank you. Sorry, someone's at my door. But okay, I see how, if you look at a law firm and see a lot of veterans, how that can show the firm may have a good work culture. On the other hand, would you say it's true the firm routinely has vacancies posted to the same attorney level positions that has a poor work environment? No, not necessarily. So some law firms are just very competitive to stay employed at. So that could be large law firms, it could be small law firms. It doesn't, and people may leave for a variety of reasons. They may leave because it doesn't pay enough. They may leave because of the work environment. There's all sorts of reasons that people should leave. But it is, if you can stick around at a law firm, I think the idea is that most of the time you're going to be happy. And a lot of positions does not mean a bad work environment. Many times a lot of positions means a good work environment if the firm's expanding. So it's not something that necessarily to be that concerned about. What makes a great attorney? Personality, work ethic, and others. That's a good question. I think that the most important thing to be the best attorney possible is you need to have probably above average intelligence to average intelligence. So you need to be smart. You need to have a good work ethic. But the best thing I think is you want to be an advocate. You need to be an advocate and take people's side. And that's what they need. So everyone that needs an attorney, whether it's a company or an individual, wants people that will take their side. And that's really the thing that people need. They need people that'll take their side and believe in them. And it's the same thing with employers. Employers need people that will take their side. A lot of things we've been talking about today are about taking the side of an employer, meaning you don't look for negative news. You take their side and you try to be positive. Certainly you can fix negative news and so forth, but you want to be very positive and you take people's side. You take your employer's side and then you take your client's side, and you're able to do that in a way that means a lot. Let's hear her. I applied for a job and was quoted a salary range. I was later contacted by a recruiter who unknowingly tried to pitch me for the same job. They mentioned the salary range was $15,000 less than what was quoted from the hiring manager. This interaction made me a bit wary work requires. Can you shed light on how recruiters are paid and why the salary was $15,000 less than what the hiring manager side? The salaries are always I would say that the recruiter probably didn't know the salary. Did not know the salary. Law firms do not reduce the salaries of people if a recruiter's involved. I would just say that the recruiter did not know the salary. Recruiters are compensated in different ways. So some recruiters are compensated from the law firm based on, there's different types of searches. There's contingency, which is just, if you find someone, we'll pay you this amount. If you find a person, you get this. There's retained, which means we're paying you no matter what, just bring us people, and no matter what. And then contingency, there's different ways of paying. So some law firms may pay 20, well, some of them may pay 1,000. There are some out there like that, but they may pay 2,500. Others pay, 10% of your salary, 15%, all the way up to 30%. So there's a few firms that pay 30%. They tend to be like the very best firms out there that rarely hire people. And then the majority of them are at 25% of your salary. The majority of other big firms are at that, but a lot of them are less. Some of them are 15. And then there's always guarantees. So you have to stay like a year, for example, associated with everything. So those are how the searches work. But I would say if you're leery of working with recruiters, you should only work with a recruiter that you believe is going to really help you. So it's not just a question of sending your resume. It's a question of how you're presented and how the recruiter prepares you for interviews. We prepare all of our candidates very well for interviews, I believe, and they go in, and then we also market them in a way where we emphasize their different aspects about their personality and background that's helpful, and that sort of thing. So it really depends on the recruiter and how the recruiter is marketing you. But I don't know why they would mention a lower salary. My opinion is that they probably just didn't know it. I've never quoted someone a lower salary. When, the recruiter's interest should be in quoting you a higher salary. And so they probably just didn't know. Just give me 1 second. I'll be back. I'm just going to grab something. Okay, I got some more questions, and then we'll work through these, and then we'll be in good shape. These are all great questions. And if anyone has any more, I certainly appreciate everyone asking all these questions today. These are really good questions. I work for a successful litigation partner who's a bit messed up, as I think you defined it in an earlier slide. He is highly reactive and moody. Despite his personality, the firm would never let him go, given he has a lot of business. Given I support him directly, how can I manage this relationship to make my job more tolerable? So the best thing to do is you typically look for clues. What has happened to the people that have worked for him in the past? So that's always a good question to ask. Have people become more successful by working for him, or have people become less successful? So I saw something very interesting when I was at a firm. I was at a firm called Dewey Ballantyne, which is no longer in existence. It was the second firm I was at. And there was a partner, she was a litigation partner, and all these people that had worked for her, like over the past several years, they would be at this firm and then they would do some assignments for her. And then they would always leave the firm like within a few months of working for her. One woman had gone to Columbia Law School and became a waitress, and other people had just dropped off the face of the earth and out of the practice of law. And she was just I didn't know it was wrong. Why were all these people like leaving the firm after working for her? And so one Friday, I got a call that I had to do some work for her. And I didn't know it at the time, but she had been lost to all of her equity, or she'd become basically a contract partner in the firm and our non-equity partner. And I started doing all this work for her. And I realized that she didn't understand a lot. When I started giving her the answers, I realized that she couldn't understand a lot of the what I was giving her. I couldn't believe it. And she was a very well connected person politically, but she couldn't understand a lot of the stuff I was giving back to her. And so when she didn't think I could understand her, she got mad at me. And I could feel her anger. Like I was very it was very I could feel it. And I'm assuming that's what other people came up against as well, or something along those lines. And so if people have worked for that person in the past and not good things have happened to them, then that's usually a clue that's probably not a good person to work with. And I know I was thinking the other day too about another partner that I know, and he basically hires people. He's at another firm, and not one that I've ever worked at, but he basically runs through an associate about every 2 years, and he brings on the associate, and the associate writes memos and stuff for him, and then he gets rid of him and brings in another person to help him. And so no one that's ever worked for this guy has ever made partner. He's never really helped their careers. And so you have to look at what has happened to people in the past. So if you're working for a very difficult partner, then you have to say, is it worth it for me to work for them? And it may be. If that partner has a lot of business and you can commit to them and do really good work and they'll advance you, then that's a good sign. But if that partner is going to be someone where not good things are going to happen to you over time and where it's a little bit dangerous, then that's not a good sign. So you just need to understand what the person's like you're working for and whether or not it's going to lead to something good. If the person does have a bad personality and you feel like it's going to be problematic for you in the long run and you can't understand him, and you feel like he's going to create problems and it's not going to lead anywhere, then maybe you should try to find someone else to work for in your firm. Another thing that's very interesting to me too is I have a couple people working for me, and that where I'm actually very reactive and moody with them, and meaning I'm not like always the nicest person, and I find fault where I probably shouldn't find fault sometimes, and I get mad at things that maybe don't make a lot of sense to get angry about. And what's interesting about that is those people that have been here a long time, they just realize that's part of my personality, and they take the stuff in stride and they're fine. And then they go back to work and then everything is fine for them. That's an interesting idea. If someone is very difficult, then maybe you're going to be much better off in the long run just putting up with it and getting along with it. And that can actually be very effective for many people. And so it's not always a bad idea to put up with it. But try to make sure that it's going to lead somewhere positive and just look for clues about what's going to happen. Staying with a firm, with a law firm, long term is a good idea if it works. Do you have any tips for a first second year associate not able to meet their hours at a small to mid-sized firm? Is that a good reason to look for another job? So getting hours in a firm is about a couple different types of things. So one of the things about getting hours is are given a lot of work in most law firms. Some law firms, it sounds, are just overwhelming people, and on this call in particular. But people are given a lot of work inside of law firms, work in law firms, when they do good work. When they do good. So if a partner gives you work and you bring something back to them that's helpful to them, they don't have to spend a lot of time marking up, and it's good, then they're going to want you to do more stuff. And if you're bringing stuff back that's not good, or you're difficult to deal with, you're not like fun for them to deal with, and they're not happy with your work, then they're not going to want to give you more work. So people give people a lot of work that do good work. And so that's one of the things to make sure is you're really doing good work and you're easy to get along with, and you're giving as much work as you possibly can. Now, the other thing that's important in any law firm is I've written about this before too, but the job of an attorney is to find work to be done. Is to find work to be done. And so what that essentially means is and I've told this story before, but I'll tell it again real quickly. There was when I was graduating from high school, there was an attorney in the father of one of my friends was an attorney, and he had just built this very nice house on a lake in Michigan, and was having a party. And he was just this kind of attorney. He did anything. He did tickets. He did, I don't know, just a bunch of stuff. And he'd gone to kind of some local law school and done very well. He was circulating among the crowd of people at his son's graduation party, talking to kids. And I talked to him about just, I don't know, some sort of ticket I'd gotten. And you would have thought that if I didn't hire him, I would go to jail. And he wanted to know my parents' phone number. And it was a very stupid ticket. If I recall, it was for driving with a portable television on my dashboard or something, watching TV while I was driving down the street, or my friend was watching TV. It was just something really dumb. And anyway, so that he did the same thing with other people there too. So he was just finding work to be done. And I realized that was one of the reasons that made him successful. And the best attorneys will always give you the impression that you need more work to be done. They'll find all sorts of assignments and other things that you need to do in order to, and work that you need to do right away if you're going to for them. So that's what I would recommend, is that you find as much work to be done. So that means when you're doing work for a partner, you don't just say, here's the work and your hours. You come back and you say, here's more stuff, or here's some more ideas about what else could be done, or maybe we should do this as well for the client, or this and this. And so you need to find work to be done. The secret to any successful entrepreneur or people that start businesses is finding new types of work and new things to be done. There's always new work to be done. And I've written about this. I've written articles called, I don't know, the reason you need to find work to be done, or something along those lines, but it's just very important. So to the extent you can, you always need to find more work to do, and then do the best work you possibly can. And if you can't, then that may be a reason to look for another job. And law firms do let people go that don't have a lot of work if the law firm doesn't have the work, or if you can't create work to be done or find work to be done. Okay, here's another question. We see this kind of one every week. And anybody having more questions would be great. So these are, I'm coming from a top 10 law school with good grades, but I failed to land a summer associate position. I'm trying to get past disappointment of having failed at this pivotal point in my career. Is there something I can do to end up at a big law firm at some point in the future? Is that ship sailed? No, the firm has definitely not sailed. And you definitely can still get a position, even though you didn't get a position this summer. It's also, you were also interviewing virtually, or I don't know how interviews are going, but the ship has not sailed. People come out of good law schools all the time and without jobs, and then they end up getting positions later on. I don't think by any stretch of the imagination this ship has sailed, or your ship has sailed. I think that you have plenty of time to find a job, either through on-campus interviewing your second summer, or after this summer you can do on-campus interviewing, or also if you get a clerkship or do some other type of job when you graduate, you can apply to jobs then too. There's nothing wrong with not getting a job after the summer. It certainly hurts you to some extent because it makes it a little bit harder and people wonder why you didn't do it, but it's not the be all end all, and you can definitely get into a large law firm later. It's very common, for example, also, I will say, just to give you kind of an idea of the upward mobility of people, it's very common for people to come out of law school without even jobs, and then they start at small firms and they end up at large firms. Patent attorneys are a perfect example. So what happens with patent attorneys is they almost always, because they're engineers and already making a lot of money, they'll either go to a law school at night, or they'll go to a law school that offers them a scholarship or something to save money because they're scientific in that way, and they won't really think as much about the ranking of the law school. And then because a lot of times they're working while they're in law school, or because they have these scientific minds or whatever, they don't get the best grades in law school. And then they come out of law school without great grades, or out having gone to a great law school, and they never can get jobs in the biggest firms right out of law school, because law schools are, employers are, concerned about the quality of law school they went to or their grades and stuff. But almost all of them end up in major U.S. law firms with top salaries eventually, just by sticking with it, because there's very few patent attorneys and there's a undersupply of them. So there's nothing really to worry about. If you come out of law school, you should be able to definitely get something in the long run. It's nothing to worry about. But there are the only other thing I would possibly say about coming out of a top 10 law school with good grades is that there may be some things you're doing wrong in your interviews. You may not be making eye contact. There's maybe other things you can do better in terms of your enthusiasm. So you should read and study about what you could have been doing wrong and just become better. And so I have tons of articles and books and things that I've written about interviewing, and so uh, I would review all that and become a student of it and just learn and read about what you're doing wrong. It should be exciting to you because you can fix it, and then stay hungry. That's the big thing. Stay hungry and just don't give up. Shared some great ideas and more grad tips about law firm culture and like how to gain confidence by partners, by doing good work, avoid gossip, and how to be mindful of the information. Share to colleagues. What other tips would you share about do's and don'ts? There's a ton of stuff. There's an article. I think there's an article I wrote a couple of weeks ago. A couple of years ago. It's talked about top 35 reasons attorneys lose their jobs or something. And I would read the top reasons attorneys lose, and it's a long article. Anyway, so that particular article is something that I would recommend because that'll tell you the reasons and I would review it, that particular article. And articles too, that there's a lot of articles that I've written, hundreds of articles that can be very helpful. I've also written articles on a site called harrisonbarnes.com, and not just on BCG. That's kind of more general life advice as well. And yeah, I would recommend reviewing that as well as BCG search because there's a lot, and I'm a student of this, but the biggest thing with junior attorneys, I think I covered a lot of that today, is the quality of your work is important, and then just not getting distracted is important. Sticking with the position and doing whatever you possibly can to be committed and not to give up, because most people in your position and new attorneys end up giving up, and they'll end up getting distracted and giving up. And so you just staying focused is the most important thing. Okay, this is a question. So it's been a week and since I've not heard back from a screener. They suggested I might be hearing back sooner. Should I assume this is rejection? Okay, so I was given a presentation yesterday, and I wanted, it's actually interesting. I'd like to maybe talk about this real briefly. Let me see here. I don't know why that happened. Give me 1 second here to stop that. Sorry, give me to open this document. Just give me 1 second. I'm going to open another document. Okay. This was a presentation I was giving to our recruiters yesterday, and I probably am not going to cover it all right now, but people need to look desirable. So if you don't look necessarily desirable and you look like you don't need someone more, then a law firm wants to believe that you're desirable and that you have a lot of options. And that's part of the problem of many times when you don't get a job, some like the last person talked about a summer position and so forth, is law firms really need to believe you're desirable. And a lot of this is like seduction. There's this quote from Robert Greene. He wrote a book it's a historical type book about seduction that says that an elusive, enigmatic aura is going to make people want to know more, drawing them into your circle. The moment people feel they know what to expect from you, your spell on them is broken, which is fun. But law firms want to believe that they make people working there feel like they're on their toes and they don't know what's going to happen, and that's what you're feeling, and so you desire them more. And the same thing needs to happen with you. If someone is desperate and really likes you, then you may not like them. And I told the story to our recruiters yesterday that I thought was interesting. And there was a woman in my high school that ended up, after she graduated, she was so attractive that she was seen walking around a mall and was picked up scouted and ended up coming out to Los Angeles and being on a major television series. This is how attractive she was. She's attractive and vibrant. But her problem is when she was in our high school, no one liked her because she liked men a lot, or it was just and I'm not saying she was like, she would throw herself at people. And because she did that with so many people and the wrong people, no one liked her because she seemed desperate. So she, went through high school. She was only there for 2 years, but she went through the school with no boyfriends and that sort of thing. So if you come across as needy, and if people do that with you, like in your personal life, like this woman did, people, even if you have a lot to offer, aren't going to like you. If they think that you're needy and you need them, then they're going to back off. That's the human instinct. Just acting like you have better things to do, you could be somewhere else and so forth can be very, or that you're still working on your job can be a very attractive thing. If a law firm believes that you have a lot of options, or they think that, then that's helpful. There's people believe, and there's just all sorts of psychological studies that if something is hard to get, there's a limited supply, then people are going to be more interested in it than if not. And diamonds are in demand, and certain law firms are are much in demand because people believe they're hard to get into, and certain law attorneys, are desired by certain people. One of the things that I always try to do when I'm working with candidates is I always try to make the attorneys feel like that, or the law firms feel like the person that they're hiring is really in demand. And if you can make the law firm feel like the person's in demand, then that actually can be very helpful and get them jobs. If you tell them there's not a lot of people like this in the market and so forth. And the second they think you're just a commodity and everybody's like you, or everybody, or you're easy to find, and you want them, then they're not going to like you as much. Just like the girl that kind of wanted all these people in my high school that no one wanted because of that. And this woman, by the way, she's married to a very famous, I don't know, director, and it's just insane. But just the way she marketed herself back then, where she was desperate and acted like she needed a boyfriend and everything, didn't work. And so I think people like people who like them, but that's very clear. But people like people more, that people that might like them, because it induces insecurity and so forth. And so law firms will always want people more if they feel like that person has a lot of options. So I think you need to be careful about calling back screeners and all that sort of thing. Okay. What kind of things can you show in an interview to show that you're in it for the long haul, to overcome a presumption that you will leave if your resume shows multiple jobs? That's tough. And most of the time when people that have had multiple jobs say that they want to settle down and not have more jobs, they never do. So I don't know why that is, but they don't. So I would just say you have to communicate that you really want the job, that you're going to stick around, and those sorts of things. If the law firm is interviewing you, then that means that they're interested in you, and they may bring you on anyway. And if you get through the door and you've had multiple jobs, so I don't know that's anything to worry too much about. But if you do get in the interview, then you should do whatever you can to convince them of that. And I've written articles about this. There's a long one that's from a couple weeks ago. It's called "The Law Firm Wants to See That You Can Do the Job Long Term." And so whatever you can do to show the law firm that is good. So I would review that article. But the biggest thing you can do is say, I'm looking to settle down. Most of my moves for good reasons and that sort of thing. And the law firm is going to hire the best person it can, or the person that's going to take the least work. I see here. Now, when I say the least work, that many times they'll hire people, they'll make mistakes hiring because they're trying to fill the opening as quickly as they possibly can. And they don't want to keep interviewing a lot of people. I'm worried about going back to the office once things open up. I really enjoy working home because I'm able to build more hours. What do you recommend to make this an easy transition? Yeah, I don't know. I agree. People do working at home more. The only thing is it is useful in terms of your work, to have contact with other attorneys, and face-to-face interaction can be very valuable. So I don't think there's really much you can do about that. I think that, and FaceTime is valuable. Attorneys like having other attorneys around because it provides them support and they feel supported, and partners like having people that can stop by their office and talk to them or give them work or see them in the halls. And so that's just part of the job. And attorneys that work in groups, they want to be around other attorneys. And so that's just something to do. To make an easy transition, you can set aside time for yourself. So that can be, if you want to exercise in the morning or different things that you're doing now, then you can do it like that. But that's how I'd recommend doing it. But you definitely do want to work in the office. Okay. A lot of what you're saying is resonating with me, and not necessarily in a good way. Possibly one of the people who's very interested in gossip. I've also been difficult to manage in prior jobs. I'm embarrassed by this behavior looking back now and listening. How can I make sure I don't make the same mistakes in the future? I think that you just need to be careful. There's a book that a guy that's an Orthodox Jew gave me once, and because it's written by a rabbi, it's called, I think, Watch Your Tongue, or something along those lines. And there's a saying in Judaism, I don't know, Lashon Hora or something, I don't know what it's called. But that's a good book to read. And it's actually very interesting. And you just want to make sure you're improving, and you want to make sure that you're not being part of gossip, and you want to make sure that you're not difficult to manage. And so everything's about a process of improvement. And just if you're improving, then that's great. And you want to just constantly improve. And so being on a webinar like this is very useful because you're learning and you're becoming a better person. And anything you can possibly do to become a better person is important. And this is great that you're on this webinar because it's helping you become a better person, and definitely will help you in the long run. I went to a top 25 law school and got low grades, below 3.0. Since graduating, gotten experience and always done good work for the partners I worked with. Great. I want to transition to big law, however, my grades disqualify me. No, your grades will not disqualify you. So there's an article called Law School Grades in Your Career. And I may do that in the next week or so as a webinar, because that would be a good one. But the idea is that when you get out of law school, there's not a lot of people like you and that have your skills. And so are there that when you get out of law school, the law firms for new attorneys, the only way they have to measure you, the only way law firms can evaluate you is based on grades and quality of law school. But after you've been out, it's your practice area, number of attorneys in your city, and people still doing the work. So that means there's fewer of you. This becomes your distinguishing factor after some time. I gave you the example earlier, the patent attorneys, like how there's hardly any of them that have experience. And so after years, they end up getting to big firms. So most large law firms, now there are some exceptions to that. Some of the big firms like Gibson Dunn and some Latham and some other really good firms will pretty much always be interested in grades, because that's just one of the things that are necessary to work there. But the majority of AmLaw 100 and 200 law firms aren't going to pay much attention to your grades when you've been out a year or two. They really don't care. They just need people to do the work. And the grades really tell nothing but how you did compared to your peers in law school. But the problem is your peers in law school are now in other practice settings, not law firms. They are in other cities, other markets, no longer practicing, all sorts of things, and in different practice areas. Let's just say, for example, you practice ERISA law, and there were 300 people in your class. You may be the only graduate that does that, only person in your class, and there may be only 50 people or 100 people, maybe 75 people in your class law school's doing it, 2 in your market. So you get the idea. So it's just the more time goes by, the law of supply and demand kicks in, and that's how everything works. So law firms do not care as much about your grades anymore. Some law firms hire people without even asking about your grades, without even asking for your transcript. I've seen that before numerous times. Okay, this is a paralegal question, so I don't know if I can help out with that. But my idea would be I would apply for being a paralegal in many states. There's nothing. Okay, just 1 second. Sorry, I'll be back in 1 second. Sorry. Yeah, so that would be my advice in terms of just working as many. If you're a foreign trained attorney, you started as a paralegal, then you were an attorney. And then, so my advice in terms of becoming an attorney in the U.S. is if you do have your LLM, then take the bar, and then just start applying to a lot of different types of firms. And that would be my objective. And then and then also applying to firms that don't necessarily have openings many times. Okay, let's see here. What is the right way to strike a balance between wanting the job and coming across as not needy, as you said? The idea is you want to convince that you want the job, but when a law firm doesn't follow up with you, you just need to act like you have other options, and you need to come across as having confidence. And so the more confidence you have, the more likely the law firm is going to want to hire you. So you need to seem like you're desirable and not someone that is not desirable. No one wants someone that they feel like no one else is going to be interested in. So a lot of times law firms will say, call us about this person if they get other offers. And that means they want to see if other people are interested in you. So you need to act like you're very desirable. You're getting, you have a lot of options, but you really like this firm. Okay, this is the last question. Let's see here. I definitely have to know. I'm a 6-year associate at a mid-sized firm in a city with a limited legal market. I enjoy working at my current firm, and the partners group told me that I'm on the right track for partnership. I wouldn't consider working for any firm if I were to stay here. However, I've been thinking about relocating to a larger city for professional reasons and personal reasons, specializing in a practice here and more opportunities for kids. My family and I are thinking needed a few years with my partner before we can relocate. My partnership will agree soon. Should I share my plans or should I just keep quiet since I have a few years before I can move? It'd be more beneficial to be a partner if I were to look for a firm in different markets. Yes. So I think you should do whatever you can to make part in your existing firm if you're not planning on moving. I also think you should try to start getting clients. And I think you are going to be more beneficial. You should never talk about your plans of moving. If you're going to move, then move in the future after you've 100% confident or that's what you want to do. But I would not do anything right now. You should never share plans with a firm because they will not be invested in you anymore if you tell them about this. And if they're not invested in you, then they won't make you partner. They will stop giving you work and they could always let you go. So no, you need to be very careful about that. So I would do whatever I can I would just work as hard as I can and think about relocating in a few years. That's it. But not right now. Definitely not right now. Okay, thank you. And it was good talking to everyone. And I look forward to next week. And I do also a webinar tomorrow for law firms. So you should be able to find some information about that online too. I do that at the same time every Thursday. Thank you.